Hello, hello. We are back for our third week. Can you believe that, Dr. Latanya?
Three weeks, and they going by so fast.
Yes, they really have. I want to just say thank you, thank you. I am Dr. Pamela Ellis, and we're just so grateful that you are joining us today to talk about economic mobility through higher education. I mean, we've had some good conversations, and I've just really enjoyed this series that we're doing for Financial Literacy Awareness Month.
Mhm.
And so this idea came about from you, Dr. Latanya. So you want to say a few words about it?
Oh, I listen. It's been the
Yeah.
synchronicity is unmatched. We
Yes.
couldn't have planned this if we wanted to. But after having connected at a Congressional Black Caucus Foundation women's event virtually, we followed up
Yes.
because the fortune is in the follow up. We hear that, but now you are witnessing what
Yes.
happens when you actually do the follow up. Had some really
Exactly.
good introductions to each other. I shared a little
Yeah.
bit about financial literacy awareness, what it means, and of course, how it
Mhm.
impacts the clients that
Yeah.
we serve.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So we're going to just start out today. This is our third part of this series. And, the key thing we want to really unlock in our discussions is, families thinking about, how economic mobility is, something that starts a little bit sooner
Right.
than we often think about. And I'll certainly talk more in terms of the higher education side of that, because in my line of work, where I'm working with families on the college admissions process, in many ways, a lot of times they see that as a vehicle
Mhm,
for economic mobility for their children. And
mhm.
so, just, that topic, of course, is just near and dear to my heart. And so I'm just excited to get into it a little bit more
Yes.
today. We talk through it. And last week we did a spotlight on you, Dr. Latanya. Yeah, you want to give us a little bit of a recap of
Oh,
that conversation last week?
sure. And thank you for that. So,
Mhm.
as the founder and creator of Dynastic Wealth, which is a
Yeah,
research informed tool and framework that helps families
yeah,
get on the same page about money and wealth, and helps
right.
us to, especially for
Mhm.
families who are from communities that have a history of being financially excluded, right? We don't have the tools or the
Yes,
language. It's
yes,
not been normalized or conditioned um, to,
yes,
to think about wealth as more than just money. And so that's
right.
what Dynastic Wealth helps us do to
Hmm.
heal first from
Yeah.
financial trauma. And then that allows us, that holds the emotional space to
Hmm.
create wealth in all its forms: financial, spiritual,
Yes.
the wealth of knowledge, right?
Hmm.
Intellectual and relational wealth to go beyond what we understand generational wealth to be, to build our
Hmm.
family dynasties. And so that relates so well
Yeah.
to the work that you're doing. So I'm ready to learn about your journey, your story.
Yeah.
Tell us about Compass. How did it come about? What kind of work were you doing, or what were you seeing in your
Hmm.
professional life and your lived experience that made you
Yeah.
stop and say, I have a solution to this problem that I'm seeing in the market? What was that?
It actually came about in a different way because I was actually really happy with doing education research.
Okay.
I was doing that work for a research lab in another firm, and I was remote even back then. And I've been working remotely now for close to 30 years. But back then, the organizations that I worked for were in Boston, Los Angeles, and then North Carolina.
Okay.
And so I was living in Ohio at the time and did research with schools, with educational organizations, state organizations, and some community-based groups, some higher ed institutions. So it was doing research and evaluation work. Plus, I was a mom of three. And being a mom who was just obsessed with schooling and figuring out how to help my own kids through the process, some families saw some of the opportunities that they had, things that they were doing, and asked me, hey, can you help me with doing this for my kids? And
Mhm.
these were families who had middle schoolers. And they asked, well, what about finding the right high school? So it just evolved from there.
Mm.
And when I started my company, because families were asking me, I'm thinking like, I need to put something together that's a little bit more structured. And so when I put together the program, it was based on my dissertation work,
Gotcha.
because my dissertation work is around high school to college transition. And
Wow.
so I wanted to still, like you talked about, research informed programming and using that to really support families with achieving those goals and dreams that they had for their children. So
Mhm.
that was how it came about. You didn't expect that,
I love
huh?
it. I love it. In my research, there is this idea, these two schools of thought, right? That
Yeah.
people come to their entrepreneurial journey either out of necessity or opportunity.
Yes.
So I love that this was an opportunity that you
Yes.
felt capable and that you felt
Yeah.
competent to capitalize on.
Yes. But I think the drive for really helping my kids, though, that was
Yeah.
almost a sense of necessity
Okay.
because, when I was growing up through school, I was told that I wouldn't amount to anything. And so that led me to, really work extra hard,
Okay.
to try to do things. And then when I became a mom, I knew, especially being a Black mom with Black children,
Mhm.
that they too may run into that same, thing where they're told that, they're not going to amount to anything, or teachers setting low expectations for them, because we see that all the time, even today in our schools.
Yes.
And so that need to really show them different and to be able to support them through the school system led to me just like trying to learn everything I could
Mhm.
about how to help them through that.
And that's another point of intersection because
Yeah.
those two traditional schools of thought are necessity or opportunity. But I think what I'm
Yeah.
hearing you say on Dr. Pamela is you actually have you showed up as a generativity based entrepreneur. And so
Yeah.
that emerged from the research that more than almost any other
Hmm.
culture, we are
Yeah.
doing this work to create better opportunities for those
Yes.
that come behind us. So
Yeah.
congratulations, my generative entrepreneur friend. So as it relates to that structure that you
Yeah.
were building out for Compass, you came
Mhm.
upon these 5 forms of fit.
Yes,
Was
which
that
are so surprisingly aligned with your five pillars. So
yes.
yeah, it is. And we had talked about this briefly before we started, just in terms of how that came about.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of it, was just through working with families
Mhm.
and seeing some of the patterns, trends, being a student of that. And also, not so much as
Mhm.
stopping at high school, also seeing like what was happening in terms of students actually completing and finding that information. And I know that for many times, with high schools, they don't have the bandwidth to really track and find out if students are completing or what their experiences in college are. And so coupling that with the research and just kind of understanding better or learning better through the data. Okay, what is it about these lists, these college lists, and what am I seeing in terms of what's supporting students not only with being admitted to college, but also thriving once they get there? And so that's really the genesis of it, I would say, in terms of that framework. And once COVID happened,
Yeah.
and when George Floyd was murdered, I think crystallized them in terms of really talking about all five of them, because it was four that I talked about more publicly,
Right.
because the other one was just an understood, which was the cultural side of it.
Yeah.
And so that's, really, how those five that I talk about were formed.
Okay. So you mentioned that
Mhm.
that fifth one was the cultural fit, but what were
Yeah.
the other four that you were elevating or amplifying?
Yes, it was academic fit,
Mhm.
social, financial, and vocational.
Okay.
And those are all factors that, when families are thinking about colleges, they're usually only thinking about maybe one or two of them,
Mhm.
and not really thinking about a full view approach
Mhm.
around how to know which colleges to
Right.
choose.
Right.
And the thing about it is that the other thing that we've seen with that, which is especially the case if families are not going to qualify for financial aid, the money is going to come from the college. And
Ah.
so if the bulk of the money is coming from the college, it's going to be around that fit piece. That fit
Mhm.
piece is going to be even more important. And it always starts with the student.
Okay.
So many times we start with, okay, what's the brand name? What's the tuition?
Right.
That's where we're going to apply.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so in your work with families, you said that they will usually only focus on one form. Is it safe to presume that
Yes.
that one fit they were focusing on, was it academic or
It's
which
it's usually academic or financial.
okay,
Because
got
as parents, a lot of times we go online, we look at the sticker price online and we say, oh, you're going to apply here or you're not going to apply here.
yes, 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 yes.
Yes.
Okay, so then speaking of financial fit, let's talk money,
Yeah.
financial literacy awareness month.
Right.
As parents and families are navigating this journey, how can
Mhm.
they identify a college? What are those tips or best practices that they
Yeah.
should be using to identify a college that has a true financial fit without
Yes.
sacrificing the quality
Yeah.
of the educational experience or economic opportunity?
Yeah, that's really good. And there are a couple of ways that I look at it. So one is, really knowing what their financial policy is. And every college outlines that, but sometimes we don't want to read the fine print because that just looks like a burden to do.
Mhm.
But they outline their financial policy. And one of them that sometimes families may not be aware of is when they say need aware. If their policy is need aware, that means that when your student applies to that college, if they feel that they have a need, they may not admit them.
Wow.
And so that in turn can mean that, if they do apply and get admitted, it's because they assume that they're going to pay in full.
Wow. That
So,
is huge.
yeah. And that's something that sometimes families aren't paying attention to or reading. And
Mhm.
then the other side of it, which has a big financial implication, is the application deadline that you're applying for. And I never get tired of explaining to families the difference between early action and early decision.
Okay.
Early decision is binding, and it means that if your student is admitted through the early decision deadline, that they will have to go to that college regardless of financial aid.
Wow.
And I have to share this story. So I am college counselor for semester school in DC. And I present to parents, every semester, meet with students as well, which I just love. And last year, this family reached out to me in the spring of senior year. I had worked with them. I had, met this family in junior year, but in spring of senior year, they reach out and they were like, we don't know what to do. Our son got into this college, they were really excited about it. And our bill is $360,000. And I was just like, okay, tell me what happened here. And they had applied early decision without knowing that that was a binding decision.
Wow.
And it's it's serious. It's serious. And so, the other, quick thing I'll just share, I had a student, a few years ago who had applied to Penn, and
Mhm.
she applied early decision. And so when you apply early decision, the parents have to sign off on
Okay.
it. So that everyone knows, the school counselor is notified as well, so that everyone is on the same page that this is a binding decision. So this student comes into my office, around mid-December, excited, and I
Mhm.
wanted to see this letter as well.
Mhm.
And so she brought in her letter. The first page, Dr. Latanya, said, "We congratulations, you've been accepted to Penn. We can't wait to have you." The second page was the invoice.
Ooh.
And the invoice was at that time 76,500, and the deposit was due January 1st.
Wow.
And the other condition is that you have to notify and remove all other outstanding applications. So you don't even get a chance to see what any other school offered because you have a binding decision. And so that's how it works.
My goodness. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna try to recover from that. So early decision versus early action. Now, what's the early
Yeah.
action?
Oh, you can apply early. You can find out the decision in December, but you don't have to notify them until May. And
Got
so that way you can look at other offers
okay.
and determine where your best offer is.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we'll definitely. I would love to maybe kind of close the loop and come back to the
Yeah.
financial fit, but kind of moving over to the academic fit, especially from your experience
Hmm.
where families
Yeah.
would either be looking
Yeah.
at financial or academic, right? Um,
Uh-huh.
how do you find the schools or the options that have the right academic fit to contribute to that long-term success, especially
Yeah.
considering, these young people are still figuring themselves out?
Yes, they are still figuring themselves out. And that's something that I really want to say to parents because oftentimes they're worried that, oh my goodness, my kid needs to know what they're majoring in. And I said, no, they don't. They don't.
Yeah.
And, one of the important things that they can do even during high school is participate in some type of exploratory summer
Mhm.
program to help them with learning about what lawyers do or what engineers do. And that's a way to help them to start to think about, that career exploration and what potential majors may interest them. But, the colleges have tons of majors, that are options for them. And we give students a guide sheet on how to research colleges and how to really see what type of academic programs are there for them. And I think of it, that academic piece, though, it's the major, it's also how a student learns.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's any type of accommodations they may need, as well as the support that can help them with their learning.
Mm-hmm.
And the support could be, maybe it's some type of tutoring, but it's also study abroad, which can support their learning, or doing research.
Yeah.
And so I just say that, a number of colleges thrive on undecided, and it's okay if
Yeah.
students are undecided when they
Yeah.
go to college, and they can determine that major once they're there.
Yeah.
I mean, I must have changed my major 7 times freshman year.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really, I thought I wanted to major in physics in college. That was the major that I had indicated that I was interested in. And let me tell you, my freshman year of college, we had an exam
Mm-hmm.
to take. And the first exam in Physics 51, my score was as close to zero as I've ever seen in my life. And I knew then that this is probably not going to be my major,
Uh,
because if I'm going to, suffer in this way and really be this challenged by understanding the concepts, um, I don't know if that's
yeah.
the direction I want to go in. Is this really how I want to spend the next 4 years of my life? And so, yeah, that was the end of that.
I appreciate that, especially because we think about how exploratory
Yeah,
learning, study abroad,
yeah,
internships, how that affects a student's eventual economic mobility or their
yeah,
economic potential. We don't
definitely.
talk enough about how
Yeah.
staying in the wrong major has a negative effect.
It really does, because one of the things it definitely hurts is your confidence.
Mm-mm.
And if you're going through college with no confidence, no
Yeah,
sense of really feeling good about yourself,
yeah.
that is going to definitely damage everything. And when you mention that about economic mobility, I feel like one of the biggest values of college is the network.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I mean, that's invaluable.
Yeah.
And I would say, even for it's more, especially for my master's program, almost every corporate, you know, path
Mhm.
job I had after my MBA program
Mhm.
came from that networking. And it was just so powerful. It's still powerful today, because I feel like I can call an alum, from that college, and they'll take my phone call.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so the networking can never be
Mhm.
understated. It is just so important. And that's one of the key benefits, that comes from college.
Right.
And it also, supports, students with that economic mobility.
Right. Right.
Um, Kaylee mentioned parents have to also be as supportive as possible to their student in this explanation, and encouraging finding different opportunities to explore. Amen on that, Kaylee.
Amen and amen.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
And, you know, parents, yeah, they definitely have to be supportive of that. And I know I was actually talking with a mom recently, and her kid wants to major in the liberal arts. And she was just like, I want you to major in, engineering,
Right.
major in STEM. And the student is just not interested in that. And
Yeah.
so that's another conversation to have, because oftentimes it's, um, parents pushing sometimes a particular degree or pathway, because they feel that that's what their kids should do. But if that's not what they're wanting to do, that can easily backfire.
Absolutely. And that sounds like it's a great dovetail into the social fit, right?
Yeah.
Um, Thinking about academic persistence. I know a lot of the
Hmm.
colleges and administrators are looking at
Yeah.
educational outcomes and graduation rates, but
Yeah.
talk to us about social fit.
Yeah, the social piece, that's a big one. And I'll share a student of mine over the years. I mean, I've worked with, hundreds, thousands of students.
Mhm.
I've had two transfers, two transfers.
Wow.
And so one of them was more recent, and it was really a mismatch socially.
Mhm.
And so the student was going to a college from a Midwestern cold city,
Mhm.
and the college is located in the West, sunny, 300 days of sunshine.
Right.
But, and he was really excited about going to this college. But what happened freshman year was the social
Mm,
aspects of it. I mean,
mhm.
he felt like it was too much of a party school.
Gotcha.
And with that, ended up transferring by winter, you
Wow.
know.
Wow.
And so, and that was actually a similar situation with our first student who transferred. For her, it was the sorority
Mhm.
emphasis on college at
Mhm.
the college that she was attending, and just feeling like, that was just not what she wanted to do. And I think there may have been some hesitation and fear that she wouldn't get accepted
Sure.
through the rush process, because that college, did their rush in the fall for
Um,
freshman year, which
wow.
was really intense. And so she called me to talk with me about it because she felt just so unhappy there.
Mhm.
And I ended up, vetting a couple of more colleges and working with her to negotiate actually keeping some money that she had been offered and had turned down for another college that she ended up going to and really enjoying.
Wow.
So that social piece can definitely play a role.
Mhm.
And, one of the statistics, I love to share this, that you can look at to really get a sense for just how happy students are
Mhm.
in freshman year, is that retention
Okay.
number. And so if a college has freshman retention of only, on something under 60%, that's probably not a good sign, because kids are coming and leaving.
Leaving. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So how do you initiate a conversation about social fit, and how, especially from a student's perspective, how do you
Yeah.
help to give the student the agency and the voice to have that kind of conversation?
Something, a lot of it comes up when they do their visits. And students are really sensitive to their surroundings and other students when they do the visits.
Mhm.
I was talking with a family just recently that did some visits, and one of their comments was that when they were visiting the campuses, they noticed that students were sitting separately
Mm.
as opposed to spending time together.
Mhm.
And, another family just mentioned how students weren't speaking to each other or to them.
Okay.
So
Right.
it's that kind of thing. And you can tell. And that's really part of that social aspect of it. Yeah.
Interesting, interesting.
Yeah.
This is so enlightening, especially having been in the
Hmm.
classroom
Yeah.
for, in my former life
Yes.
for 11 years, and seeing the part of the student story
Yes.
after they made the decision. But
Yes.
I can imagine that,
Hmm.
we're customarily making such fully informed
Right,
decisions about, where we're going to spend the next 5 or
right.
6 years of our
Yeah,
life on the college campus.
exactly, exactly. And one of the things I bet you saw was just how some class years just looked a little different.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah. And
Interesting.
so, Janice, thank you so much. You want to see higher education combined with certifications and vocational trainings for students along with degrees.
Hmm.
Also explain majors and minors are both important. Don't waste that minor. Also, let's talk disability. You need to be qualified for more than one thing if you develop a disability.
Hmm.
Okay, that's Janice from Syracuse. All right, Janice.
Right. We can unpack those
Yes.
and some other questions.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
like that one
absolutely.
certifications, that first one. You have any thoughts?
Yeah, combining them with certifications and vocational.
Hmm.
I feel like some are doing that. And Janice, I think of, Syracuse is both a research university and also one that offers, that liberal arts range of majors and minors, as you've mentioned. And so maybe they're not doing it as much in the way of the certifications and the vocational piece, but there are some colleges that do. And I think that brings up a good point around the fact that there are so many colleges that are out there. And when students are thinking about colleges for their list, my hope is that when they're looking at it based on fit first for themselves, that can open up colleges that they may not have considered before and colleges that are still a great fit for them.
I like to
Yeah.
add a little bit of depth to that part of the
Yeah.
conversation. So to
Hmm.
Janice's point about the vocations and the certificates,
Yeah.
if we could maybe bring the conversation out a little bit, and this was my
Hmm.
experience actually. I went
Yeah.
to grad school to literally to prove this point about
Yeah.
why access to entrepreneurship education needed to be more important. But
Hmm.
along the way, Janice, what I learned was that it wasn't so much the curriculum that was happening boots on the ground at the college itself,
Hmm.
but the educational policies that were coming
Yeah.
from the state that were informing what we teach. And so
Yeah.
things that we want to be mindful of, and this kind
Hmm.
of to economic development is really looking at how does the state or your region determine
Right.
what the employment opportunities are going to be. What is the research
Mm.
telling them that
Yeah.
where jobs and where economic
Right.
opportunity is going
Hmm.
to come from, and then some kind of way that's how you
Hmm.
make the case for
Right.
bringing vocational
Right.
into the academic setting, because as we know,
Hmm.
they exist in like two different parts of the world, right? We have
They do.
college, and then we have
Hmm.
the R1s, or the aspiring research
Yeah.
one universities, and they
Hmm.
don't always talk to each other.
They don't. They don't at all. And so, yeah, that's a really, really great point.
Yeah.
Really
And
great
that's
point.
also not to say that we
Hmm.
as parents or influencers
Hmm.
in these young folks' lives
Yeah.
can't talk about, well, what about, you getting
Right.
certified in Microsoft Office or Google or
Yeah.
be a
Hmm.
CPLPN, right? Get
Yes.
some
Yeah.
those
Right.
certifications that don't
Uh-huh.
require the high school diploma first, so
Right.
that you are creating more opportunities. And then you come into
Mhm.
your college and academic
Yeah.
experience in the classroom with this much wider
Right.
breadth of knowledge.
Right. One of our students is going to be doing that now, one of our seniors, because his high school offered a nursing type of certification. I'm not sure which one it was, but
Mhm.
that's one of the um, you know skills that he had, and that certification that made him attractive to some colleges for their nursing program because he
Amazing.
already had that experience through high school and
Mhm.
now is going to be going to college in nursing. And
Oh,
nursing is a very competitive field and major. It is.
was really strategic.
Yeah,
That was really
yeah,
strategic. Um,
yeah.
Janice had 2 other questions, right? Or was it one more?
And you had another one. What was it? Disability. Uh, I'm not sure what that's referring to, Janice. So you said you need to be qualified for more than one thing if you develop a disability. I mean, the thing that comes to mind for me is if someone is going to college to play a sport, and if they were
Mhm.
injured and no longer could play that sport, because sometimes that definitely affects your scholarship.
Sure.
And so I'm not sure if that's what you mean, Janice. And so if you could say a little bit more, then we can definitely address it. So,
Yes,
so
please.
yeah.
But
Um,
Janice opened up a good segue into vocational fit. I think, and then
oh
of course,
yeah.
I gotta hear about this cultural fit. But tell us about vocational fit. What is
Oh,
that?
yeah. So that's the fourth factor of fit, which is vocational. And it's really about thinking about what it is you want to do after college and making sure that that's met at that college.
Okay.
And again, it still works if your student is undecided,
Mhm.
because some colleges where students are undecided can, be an undecided student when they come in.
Mhm.
They will have programs that start as early as freshman year to help them discovering that career and matching them up with alumni, matching them up with internship opportunities as a way to determine what that will be. And
Mhm.
so that's the vocational fit. And for other students who may know what their interests are,
Mhm.
so if they know they want to be a lawyer, they know they want to be a physician, that college having pre-med track or having a pre-law track. One of my students is interested in, large animal veterinary studies. And
Mhm.
so she is, then looking at whether or not they have that pre-vet track. How does that work for her going into veterinarian school, et cetera?
So this is so enlightening. I'm a
Mhm.
product of FAMU. Just as an aside, I
You
just
always have to shout out those rattlers. I
I
tell you,
do.
everywhere I go, there are rattlers and they are proud.
Listen, and I just learned that FAMU has a veterinary science program. I was like, well, where have I been all these years? But just to your point about that, thinking about those students who we
Yeah.
know now it's okay to be undecided or to have an undeclared
Yeah.
major.
Mhm.
How does a student like that, or how does a family with an
Yeah.
undecided major, how do they
Mhm.
navigate and figure out vocational fit?
Well, the colleges support them with that. And so I would just say if that college actually offers some type of, internships
Mm.
and access to alumni database while they're a freshman and throughout, that could be a way to navigate that vocational fit.
Mhm.
Another one could be well, if they are admitted as an undecided student, sometimes they may be departmental based or school
Mm.
based. Like maybe it's undecided in the engineering school, undecided in the arts and sciences. And so that's also a way to still have that vocational piece supported and just learning, what is offered for students in that regard.
Okay, got it.
Yeah,
That's really
yeah.
good, really good. So, in our
Mhm.
last couple of minutes, cultural fit, and where do we go from here? What steps do I take? My daughter's
Yes,
in 6th grade,
I
but
know. You don't have to worry about this right now. You just need to get a 529 plan right now.
okay, I got you. I
Okay.
got
Um, for the cultural fit, it's really about students' identity
you. Mhm.
and where they can go and have that sense of belonging. However, they may be different from the majority of students on that campus. And so the thing that I do share about the cultural fit is that it's broader than just race and ethnicity. There's regional differences. Sometimes it's gender, sometimes it's orientation, sometimes it's your learning style, so having a place where you feel celebrated and not tolerated.
And how do you find that? Is that another thing that it's based on your visits or your research?
That comes from the research for sure and the visit.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Got it.
it definitely does.
So,
Um, let's see. Uh-huh. Okay. Okay. I think I see. Uh-huh. Okay. Thank you for that, Janice. Thank you for that.
okay.
um, we were going to close out. We thank you guys so much for joining us and being here. Just
But
appreciate you.
before
What's
we do
that?
that, so you were able to squeeze your whole how you helped in 30 minutes. I know there's so
That's
much more.
what I do.
I know. Well, how can someone, follow up with you if they have questions?
Oh,
But
yeah.
what also would a next step be?
Absolutely, absolutely. You can definitely reach out to me. I would love to share with you our college confidence blueprint, which has both the roadmap for your student and also the communication guide, which we touched on last week in talking about how to talk about college. And you are going to help me in the next few weeks add
Yes.
something about talking about money for college because
Yes.
that money conversation is also a challenge for us as parents. And so that's how you can best reach out. So on LinkedIn, definitely message me. And you can also email me as well. So the
Perfect. Perfect.
College Confidence Blueprint.
That sounds that sounds like a great way to go into the weekend with
It
confidence and a blueprint to get it. So, so I'll let you close
Absolutely.
out, Dr. Pamela.
What's that?
I said I'll let you close this out.
Okay, yes. So thank you all. We look forward to sharing with you again next week as we'll be in week 4 of economic mobility through higher education. And one of the things we're going to do next week, and we're letting you know now so that you can join in with us, we're going to talk about the whiteness of wealth. That book has already changed my thinking in so many ways. And we're going to touch on it a bit more when we meet next week and really bring us to a strong close for this series during Financial Literacy Awareness Month. So
Yes,
I'm just excited for it, aren't you?
I am, and it's been such a pleasure. I've learned so much, and
Yeah.
Sparrow is in for it.
Yes. Janice, you're right about that. I was just speaking yesterday to an employee resource group and talked about tuition reimbursement. And we
Mhm.
talked about tuition reimbursement as well as 529 plans for them or for their child. Okay, Alfred, thank you. Yes, thank you. Really appreciate you. So come back next week, Alfred. Okay. So we'll be starting next week at 11 a.m. Central and noon Eastern Time. So we look forward to seeing you all. Thank you, Janice.
Thank you, everybody.